All right. We are live. Welcome, everybody, to the Gunner Technology Livestream, a weekly tech talk for non-techies and techies alike. I'm your host, Derry Merkins, with me again in a similar colored shirt. I actually just got this new shirt, so very excited about that. But with me is President and CEO of Gunner Technology, Cody Swan. What's up, Cody?
That's right. They're red on red.
Let's do this. Let's see what we got here. Business up front, party in the back. We've got our Country Shore giveaway. Make sure to sign up on our Facebook page. Country Shore Outfitters is a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. Visit them at countryshoreoutfitters.com. We got a winner. It is Peter M. from Coral Gables, Florida. Is that near you?
Coral Gables is across.
Or is that near Tampa?
Coral Gables is south of me. It's like
south of you?
Yeah.
Oh, it's south of Miami.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's down in Hurricanes country.
Oh my gosh. So that's way the heck down there. So Peter M., enjoy that hat that's coming your way, and our ebooks that are coming your way too. We got one about the history of JavaScript. We got one about the technology industry, and the one we're working on right now is about the business side of running a technology business. But before we get to that, we got our question of the week. Cody, take it away with the question of the week.
Yeah. So last week, the question of the week was, I am satisfied with the software I use at work. Agree or disagree? And in our vein of people not being very happy with technology, it was while almost 80% said they disagree with that statement. They are unhappy with the software they use at work, which is just so weird to me, because it's just like, then use different software or have other software made for you, because there's no shortage of software out there. And the ability to create it is infinite. So, but most people are dissatisfied with the software they use at work.
The level of dissatisfaction in general with technology is always shocking.
Yes. I know, it's crazy.
And yet people continue to use it. I think people are gluttons for punishment.
You know, it's weird. I was reading like that. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but like this rise of coding, like amateur coders, has given rise to people writing like small scripts to do stuff at work. Like I was reading something where some guy's like, yeah, I just whipped up a little Python script. I don't know much about it, but I copied some stuff, and now it was the most menial of tasks that he had to do, and he whipped up a little Python script to do it for him, which on one hand is very commendable, and also a little nerve-wracking if someone who doesn't really know code is writing software for your company.
Just hacking together a Python script, and God knows what it's going to do. What could possibly go wrong?
Probably used a live Python, like in Major League.
He just put its tail in the disk drive.
Hey, Jake, we got a problem. Serrano's looking to sacrifice a live chicken. Hey, Jake, we can't have people puking on live television, man. That's probably exactly what happened, or in my mind, that's what happened. So this week, I was reading that on average, people spend over 6 hours a day on their mobile phone. And I don't know.
I'm going to take the over on that.
Yeah. So that's the question: is do you spend more or less than 6 hours a week or 6 hours a day on your mobile phone?
My sister's in town, and she spends 37 hours a day on her phone.
I mean, it's a weird thing. The thing that, speaking of that, where I always get into this, like with the relationship angle of it, where like I'm sure anyone out there has heard of it, like, oh, you didn't text me back in like an hour. Like there was a time when text messaging didn't exist, and I was in that world, and relationships were able to flourish without texting. So
yeah, it's funny how soon either it's forgotten, or if you weren't in that world, you don't realize how fine it was to not hear back from someone. You'd call somebody's house, you'd know everybody's number, you'd call somebody's house, they weren't there, and they'd call you back when they got home in like 5 hours.
Yeah.
And that was a-okay.
And a husband and a wife. The husband goes to work, or maybe goes to the gym before going to work, goes to work, works, comes home. Like that's
completely out of touch. Yeah.
10 hours. And that was not unusual. That was not even normal. That was just the way it was. And people managed to stay married back then. and actually in higher percentages they manage to stay married. So it gets me wondering, and not that I have a problem with that, but I hear people complain about that all the time, and I'm like, you do realize that texting is relatively new, right?
Yeah, and I actually do have a big problem with that. I think there has to be some mechanism to go off the grid for periods of time during a day,
Oh,
with the
sure.
expectation that you're not going to be in touch with people immediately. I like the best ideas you're going to have are basically in solitude, when you're just sort of alone with your thoughts. And I think people are
We
so
all know what you're talking about when you say that.
yeah. But I think that the world we live in now just doesn't allow for long stretches of absence, which is kind of
No,
weird.
no, and if there is something is wrong, and you're mad at someone, or I don't, or so, or
It's
yeah.
actually a perfect segue into our topic for today, because long stretches of absence are a huge detriment to client relationships. And the topic of the day today is how do you keep your clients happy? So maybe that's a good place to start, because it seems to be something that you need to do to keep clients happy, is immediate responses to questions, concerns, anything, any communication coming in from them.
That may be the best segue that this show has ever experienced.
I'm not sure we're ever going to top that.
But no, you're right. The thing about, especially when you're not in an office with your client, which most vendor client relationships aren't like that, where you are kind of at a distance. I mean, if a client doesn't hear from you for like a day, they start to get uneasy. And so that communication, where you over communicate, which we've talked about, is just so important to making the client feel comfortable and important.
Yeah, and I don't know that there's, at least we haven't found a good way to say, if you don't hear back.
Nope.
You just muted me.
That was totally an accident. I was trying to minimize a window and I just clicked them.
Like, I know I'm not making the most erudite points here, but that's
I didn't like that,
move.
so I was just gonna kind of turn you off there.
That's amateur stuff.
But
it's tough to communicate that lack of immediate communication is probably a direct result of working extremely hard on their projects to clients.
Well, and that's the weird thing, and it's a lot like marketing and advertising, where it introduces a lot of inefficiencies. So the thing about marketing and advertising is, like, if everyone knew what they wanted, there would be no place for marketing or advertising. People would just buy what they needed, or what they truly wanted, and that would be it. You'd be done. Marketing and advertising introduces all of these weird inefficiencies that drive up the cost of things and try to convince us that we need things that we don't need or don't want. And so the point is, if in a client vendor relationship, if the vendor just does what they say they're going to do, then the price comes way down, because then you don't need project managers,
right?
And you don't need a lot of other things, because the project manager's job is to kind of field that communication, and communicate with the client and communicate back to the vendor, even if nothing has changed from the original. Hey, we're going to do this way, and we're going to have it done by this time. But you introduce all these artificial constructs which have this false sense of security, and really all they're doing is introducing inefficiencies and making
unnecessary overhead.
Yeah, right. That's right. That's right.
I guess that's a sad way of talking about one way to make clients happy, and it's really not the end of the world to be constantly in communication with clients during business hours. I mean, that's sort of the name of the game, and that's sort of always going to be the nature of the beast during, the regular 9 to 5. People are going to expect communication. That's sort of the world we live in now. I think we can sort of pine for days when you could shut off communication, close the door, and just sort of nose to the grindstone, get to work. But I'm not sure that that's the world we live in anymore. So I think one of the that is one of the primary ways of keeping clients happy, is just being on the ball for any question or concern they raise, within, I'd say, an hour, maybe 2 hours at the most, getting back to them with at least we're looking into this kind of thing, and then actually start to look into it. But I think you have to do that because everyone else is doing that.
And we've done this to ourselves, and I don't mean us personally, but
the industry as a whole.
Yeah, because like there's so many companies out there that don't do what they say they're going to do, and so clients have been burned so many times that they kind of feel like they have to stay on top of stuff. This is the whole reason why. This is the whole reason why we stopped doing like SEO and digital marketing. Is because there's so many snake oil salesmen out there who like promise the world with upfront costs and then don't deliver anything. That by the time uh, like we don't really do digital marketing anymore, but by the time a real company like us rolled around, it was like you were dealing with beaten puppies. They were so
right.
like distrusting that you had to overcompensate on every level, and it just wasn't profitable. We couldn't actually provide the services we needed to at a profitable level, and still provide the services and reassurances that someone would need. And that's just that's the industry. The industry ruined that relationship. And so it makes us have to work that much harder to overcome that stigma when dealing with a client.
Even though that stigma is complete nonsense at this point. What about in terms of performance, how you keep clients happy? I mean, I think there the expectations too are sort of have reached astronomical levels just because other companies promise the world, and so now you're expected to go above and beyond for basically any client at this point, which is also fine because I mean I think that's sort of another challenge to meet.
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough because on one hand, you've had other vendors promise these clients the world. So the one thing you want to do is you obviously want to be like straightforward. And so if you say, this is going to cost X and it's going to cost X and it's going to take a month, and the client says, "Oh my gosh, another vendor told me it would be 50% less than that and take 50% of the time," you kind of have to just be like, I don't see how that's possible. If you feel comfortable with them, go with them, because we cannot get this done at that cost, in that time frame. And because no amount of, the more you say that's impossible, like if I just say that's not possible, like you're getting taken for a ride, it doesn't have any effect. Like if they're going to go with that, they're going to go with that.
Yeah, it
And
doesn't really translate. It's a really hard message to get across.
so like, and you feel bad because they're going to get taken for a ride. It's like being a dad and watching your daughter date some scuzzy guy. Like,
right.
no matter, like, the more you say this is a bad idea, the more your daughter's going to think it's a good idea. And so it's just like you kind of have to let them, learn the lesson, which is tough because then they come back to you and they're like, well, we don't have the budget that we had before because we spent some of it on that. It's like, well, I mean, what do you want us to do about it? Like, so, but the point is, you have to be, we always come back to this, is earn that trust. You have to kind of hold your ground. And so that means, number one, not bending to pressure to say you can get something done quicker than you really can or cheaper than you really can, because that's going to end up hurting the long-term relationship. And it also doesn't benefit you to kind of sandbag the deadline either. And so, because you do want to provide straightforward estimates. So what you have to do is you have to look at this, and you have to look at the project, and you have to say exactly what you're going to do. And when I say don't sandbag, I come back to the whole thing that we talk about on the show a lot about unknowns. And usually when you're dealing with a client project, there's a lot of unknowns. So you have to take those into account. And unknowns, again, like I've always said, are very scary. So if the more unknowns, the timeline blows up extraordinarily. So it could be that you say there's a lot of unknowns here, so we think it's going to take 6 months, and then by stroke of miracle, all the unknowns end up being very easy, and you deliver it in 2 months. And
right.
So then you kind of have to fight the stigma of fighting against that expectation. Oh, well, they say 6 months, but they get it done in 2 months. And so again, it all comes back to communication, which is like, hey, we said this is going to take 6 months, and this is why we thought it was going to take 6 months. But it actually ended up being, as we dug into this, that all of these things were really easy. We don't want you to assume that every project is going to be a third of the timeline we initially set, because next time we could say 6 months and we get in there and every single unknown is as hard as we can imagine, and it takes the full 6 months. But the estimate should always be a worst case scenario. And so then from a performance standpoint, usually you are beating that worst case scenario. You're not sandbagging, but you're beating the worst case scenario. And that builds up the confidence in the performance aspect of things.
So again, it seems to all come back to trust and building relationships and honesty in that relationship.
Yeah, and it goes so far. Like if you notice something that's wrong with the product, like instead of trying to fix it really quickly, like shoot an email, be like, hey, I was using this and I noticed that this was a problem. I'm going to fix it right now. Because like if they find the problem, it's like a bank account. The trust is like a bank account, and it's like they're taking trust out of that bank account if they find something wrong. So even if it's the most minor thing, even if it's a minor thing and it's going to take a long time to fix, shoot off an email. Hey, I was using the product today and I noticed this glitch. It's not a big deal, but I noticed it, and it's going to take a while to fix. But I just want to let you know that I found it. Like it saves you so much in the form of trust withdrawals from getting ahead of stuff.
We've got a question on YouTube. How do you recover client happiness with an unhappy client?
Man, it's tough. It's so tough to, like, once that relationship even starts to sour, to get it back. Apologizing is huge. And it's tough for some people to apologize, especially when they don't feel like they've done something wrong. And a lot of times a client will feel like they're owed an apology, and as the vendor, you feel like, well, if you hadn't done this, we wouldn't be in this situation. But if you want to recover that relationship, apologizing is just huge. And you don't have to be phony about it, and you don't have to do one of those I'm sorry you got your feelings hurt.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. I'm sorry you got taken for a ride.
yeah.
We tried to warn you.
Apologize for your role in the situation that has arisen. And just put your ego aside and just throw that out there. I mean, if you value the relationship, which, we value all our client relationships, but it is so tough to recover a sour relationship that the best way to do it is just cut it off at the pass, apologize, and then be like, all right, now how do we get back on track here?
Yeah, hopefully move on, and then just sort of kill it for a couple months and try and repair the relationship as much as you can.
That's right. That's right. And just keep putting credits in that trust account.
So we talked about communication, we talked about performance.
By the way, I think the trust account is run on the blockchain. So
that's good. So it's secure, infinitely scalable, and it's massively overhyped.
that's right.
So we talked about communication, we talked about performance. Are there any other aspects to client happiness that we can touch on?
Well, yeah, there is. And this is the tough one, is success of the product will bring about great happiness. And we were just talking about this the other day, where you're working for a client, and the client, you can see the direction this is going, where the client is making a product inherently worse and is actually being detrimental to the long-term success of the product. And then you walk that fine line where you want the product to be successful because you want the client to be happy. Or if you're in a rev share type agreement or an equity deal, you want to share in the direct success of the product. But even from a happiness standpoint, you want the product to succeed because you want the client to be happy. And so how do you say, look, you have good intentions, but you're not thinking this through. And I will do this for you. We will build this the way you want it built, but we see major problems in the direction you're taking this. Because again, like, If you have trust, you can say that. And so you can actually directly alter the course of the project to a successful path. And if you're able to pull that off successfully, then you're not only going to have a happy client because the product is successful, but that trust level is going to go up again because the client then says, these guys really know what they are talking about because they had kind of the fortitude to stand up and say, and tell me, you know, we not only build this product, we have a stake in this product and we think you're making it worse. And here's what we think you should do.
I mean, it adds weight to what you say too. I mean, it's not coming from a standpoint of negativity and sort of deriding their product ideas or the direction they see it going. It's coming from a standpoint of, we know what works. We've seen what works historically. What you're attempting to do isn't something that works.
Right. And you have to have the trust to even say that, because if you're not being asked, if you're being asked for your feedback, then by all means provide it. But to kind of hear a client say, I want this, and to say, no, you don't. If you don't have that trust built up, they're going to think you're just complaining or you don't want to do work.
Even the feedback angle, you kind of have to tiptoe around in the outset. Nobody wants aggressive feedback in the first month of a relationship.
That's right. And so again, it all goes back to checking that account and seeing how much trust you have built up to, you know, walking that fine line among being assertive and trying to keep the product successful and keep the client happy.
Well, that's probably a good place to stop unless you have any closing thoughts or anything else to add.
No, just look for the blog post. I'm a little bit behind again, but we'll be publishing the blog post tonight, and I'll send out the newsletter. I'm gonna talk about our latest app that we released. Should I? So I'll mention that in the newsletter. But
yeah, everyone should check it out. It's actually a really cool app. It's a ton of fun.
Yep. Just in the App Store on Apple or Google Play, just search for Should I app. It's SHUDI app. And it's a pretty cool app that is like a social game to help you make decisions. Like if you were trying to say, you know, should I buy Nike Airs or LeBrons? It'll help you make your decision, kind of thing.
What's the answer there? Is it LeBrons? Which ones are better?
Does LeBron even have shoes? I was always a Jordan guy. I always went Jordan, but LeBron wasn't around when I was buying shoes. So
I remember the first like player pair of shoes I owned was a pair of Iversons.
Okay.
Black and gold Iversons in 9th grade. Those things were sweet. I don't think Iverson makes shoes anymore, though.
No, he makes cornrows now.
Yeah.
I literally had like from like the third pair of Jordans on. I had every single one from the third pair on until I got to probably about high school, and I always would get Jordans and the Griffies. I always had the latest Jordans and the latest
Griffies.
Yeah,
Griffies are sweet.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, join us next episode of our weekly Gunner Technology shoe discussion. Next week, we'll talk about Crocs and the history of Crocs.
No, remember Ruse? You could they had little pockets and you could put dollars in the tongue of the pocket. They were called Ruse.
I don't remember Ruse. Is that a Florida thing?
I had a Ruse in second grade, a pair of Ruse in second grade, and I thought I was so cool.
So join us for our new 10-part series on the history of Ruse starting next week. But actually tune in next week at 1 p.m. Eastern time for the next episode of the Gunner Technology Livestream. Make sure to check out the blog post, like Cody said, gunnertech.com. The audio for this and the video for this will actually be up on iTunes. Our ebooks are up on iBooks, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and anywhere else ebooks are sold. Make sure to check out our sponsor, Countryshoreoutfitters.com. at countryshoreoutfitters.com. They're a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. Make sure to sign up for the Countryshoreoutfitters giveaway on our Facebook page, and make sure to answer the question of the week, which, one more time, Cody, what's the question of the week?
Do you spend more or less than 6 hours a day on your mobile device?
110% of the answers will be yes, but go on there anyway and answer that question. And that'll do it for this week. Join us next week, 1 p.m. Eastern time. I'm Derry. That's Cody. We'll see you next week.